I love woven wheels. They're probably one of my favourite stitches. So with these little guys, you can create super cute little roses. You can make them as big or as small as you like. Like I said, they are really simple. Just remember with your spokes or with the foundation spokes, you always need to have an odd number. So let's try one out.
I'm going to demonstrate the woven wheel two ways. So the first way I'm going to show you is without a centre, and the second way is with a centre. Okay, so this little tiny one here, what we're going to do is just stitch in the spokes first. So your woven wheel needs to have an odd number of spokes, so it could have 3, 5 like I've got here, 7, 9, it's up to you, but it needs to be an odd number, otherwise the weave won't work. And you also want your spokes to be pretty much the same length, so that you don't have little bits sticking out once we have finished the weave. Now once you've stitched in your spokes, you can either choose to, so I've got 3 strands of cotton here. On a bigger row, sometimes I will swap my 3 strands out for 6, but with this tiny one I'm just going to do, just keep going with my 3. The reason I swap it out is because it doesn't take so long to fill. Okay, so I've got my little spokes stitched in. Now I'm going to come up between 2 of the spokes, and from this point I'm working on top of the fabric. You can see here that I'm working under the fabric to stitch the spokes, but now for the weave we're going to work on top of the fabric. So all you need to do is go over and under each spoke. So going over and under. And just be careful that you don't pick up any of the threads in the fabric. You may find that pushing through the blunt end is easier. And the tighter you tug this, the more tension, the more raised your little woven wheel or your little rose is going to be. So this is a really nice feature stitch. You can see that I actually, rather than going underneath the spoke there, I went through the thread and it just didn't pull through properly, so I'm actually just going to stitch over that. I can cover that up quite well. Kind of. Not so easy with my next time I'm going through there, but that's okay. So just going over and under until we've filled all the spokes. Because you can imagine if you did an even number of spokes, so 2, 4, 6, 8, you wouldn't get this web-like effect. So you can see here this little spoke was a little bit, excuse me, a little bit longer than the others, so I will show you how to correct that. Okay, so now that all my spokes are nearly full, I'm going to do one more round here. If you have some that are slightly longer or sticking out, what you can do is just, okay, so angle your needle down and in. You don't want to go straight down. You want to go down and in because you want this stitch to sit just underneath of this row. So you can see that my needle's going in just past or just in the rows at an angle. And I'm going to do the opposite when I come out. So I'm coming out at an angle, and I'm still just kind of below, just in from the edge. But what I'm going to do is stitch over this little spoke to help hide it. You see how that helps hide it? So that is how we do one that doesn't have a centre. So potentially you could just leave it like this, or you could stitch a little French knot in the centre. So to stitch a woven wheel with the centre, you can see I've got this here. So you could fill this centre with either French knots or satin stitch or some sort of filler, or you could leave it blank. So again, same technique, just coming up and stitching our spokes in, trying to make sure that they are even. And now, because this is bigger, I'm actually going to swap out my thread. So rather than continuing with the 3 strands, I'm going to swap it out for 6 strands. So I'll just knot this off. Grab my 6 strands. So I'm doing this in yellow, so hopefully you'll be able to see what's happening with the spokes as I do this one. So we're coming up halfway through, and again just going over and under. And it will look a bit weird to begin with. You can kind of see there's a bit of a triangle action going on, but it will fill in. And if you find it easy, you can just move the hoop around as you're working. And if you wanted to do it doubly fast, you could actually double your thread up. I'm not going to do that, but you could double your thread up so that you're essentially working with 12 strands rather than 6. And you can see as I'm working here that is overlapping the centre quite a lot. So if you want a really prominent centre, you need to leave a bigger circle. You'll see that I'm coming to the end of my thread here. So to change it, what I'm going to do is just go through the fabric, just in the middle of 2 spokes, and knot that off. Then grab some more thread. So normally I'd say keep your thread shorter rather than longer, but with your woven wheels, because you are working on the top of the fabric rather than through the fabric, you can keep them a little bit longer. So to start our next thread, we're going to come up where we finished our last thread. It doesn't need to be through the same hole, it just needs to be through the same section, because we want to continue the pattern that we had. So when I ended that thread, I'd just come under 1 spoke. So to start the next thread, I want to go over. and then we'll just keep going over and under. So if you want to keep this flatter rather than bulky, just push the threads out to the side rather than pulling them tight. And you will use quite a lot of fabric with bigger roses, not fabric, quite a lot of thread with bigger roses, just because of how they're created, how they're stitched. So again, you see how I pulled that. And what you can do is just pull it to the side. Just loosen it and pull it to the side. And as you're getting to the outer edges, it can be helpful to use your thumb to kind of, I guess, guide that thread into place. Alrighty, so we're almost filling up here. Just trying not to catch my needle in too much thread. Now if you find that you have some little loose threads like this, what you can do is you can start a new thread. I'm just going to go through to the back here and just come up through the rows. Can you see how I'm coming up through the rows? Just underneath of where that loose thread is. And then we're just going to stitch over it. So I came up there and I'm stitching over. So up there and stitching over that thread just to anchor it down. I'm going to finish this one much the same way as I did the last one, just coming up and angling my needle in and out so that I can just cover up those spokes. When your spokes are the same colour, you know, when you're using the same colour spokes as, you know, your main thread, there's not such a big issue, but I used white here. So you can kind of see the difference between the two. So it can help just to cover them with a few kind of angled straight stitches.